Okay, let's draw a sequence diagram using the Visible Analyst tutorial file. Now, a sequence diagram is one of two interaction diagrams, and they are related. You have the sequence diagram, which is the first one we'll do, and then you have, in UML 2.0, you have the collaboration diagram, which actually has been replaced with the so-called communication diagram. But nevertheless, we're going to stick with the collaboration diagram, as that is what is supported using Visible Analyst. Now, in the tutorial file, you might take a look at the definitions on the first page that talk about the components of sequence diagramming: object, class, lifeline, activation, message, self-call, object deletion, a return message or call, a condition, and an asynchronous message. The vast majority of those are important to understand. So the first thing you want to do is set up a new file, a new project file. The test file that comes with it actually has a lot of objects and entities and diagrams preloaded into it, and we don't want to mess that up. So it's a good idea to say new project, and you can call it whatever you want. Call it sequence diagram tutorial. Now that's just the name of the project. You'll also have to name the diagram as you draw it. Let's stick with, well, none of these are really pertinent to it right now. But what you can do is, we're not going to do a class diagram. Come down here and you say sequence and say OK. And portrait, you want portrait because it's going to be long up and down. Standard workspace is fine. None of the rest of this stuff matters. So just say OK, and then you'll immediately get into your drawing space. Okay, and we're going to be using the toolbars. We're going to be drawing objects along the top, and we're going to be extending lifelines and activations and sending messages back and forth. So let's begin. So we're going to add an object. Let's put it right about here. Note that you can add both the name of the object and the name of the class. We're not going to name the object, we're going to name the class instead. And the class is, for the first one, is application entry window. So let's put that in. And say OK. It says, do you want to create it? You say yes. Okay, now if we go back in selection mode and we take a look at this, note that there are two colons preceding this, and this is the reason why. The protocol, the convention is object name, colon, colon, class name. Okay, so we didn't give it an object name, we just gave it a class name, so we don't see the object name, which would precede these double colons. Okay, so there's application entry window. Then let's put in the rest of them. And when you're done, get into selection mode, and you might just move them around a little bit. It should look something like this. This one is application entry window, that's the name of the class. Application, that's the name of the class. Drive test, name of the class. License, and DMV database. Okay? So now we're going to add activation symbols. These are the lifelines. They automatically extend downward from the objects. And the way you read a sequence diagram, a sequence diagram as an interaction diagram is telling you the sequence of messages that are sent from one object to another. And you read it left to right and up to down. That is, the messages, the sequence of the messages will begin with this one and will go left to right. And as more messages are sent, we'll go down the lifeline. Okay, but first we have to add activation bars. And the way you add the activation symbol, it's this second one No, that's not it. It's this one. It's the activation. So this is a little bit tricky. So what you have to do, I'll show you how to do the first one. You go down here, and somewhere when you're in that mode, right about here on the application entry window, you click. Okay, and then you can resize it a little bit. And I recommend you do that. Maybe just kind of stretch it down a little bit. And that's pretty good. And then we're going to add activation bars to the rest of these. And when you're done, it'll look something like this. Okay, the positioning of these activation bars are important because we're going to be passing messages, and you want the message to start at an activation bar on one class or object and to end on an activation bar in another one. So the positioning of all these is relatively important for this particular sequence diagram. Okay, now we're going to add some object deletions. And in order to do that, here's the object deletion. We are going to set 3 of these, the application, drive test, and the license objects, to delete once their activation bars end. And the way you do that is very simple. You go into the object deletion mode by clicking on this icon and just click right under the activation bar on that one, on this one, and on this one, like that. Deletion means that the life ends. The object no longer exists once you have passed those sequences of messages. Okay, so it'll look something like this when you're done doing that. So at this point, before we begin adding procedure calls, let's save this, the diagram, and let's see, we'll call the diagram DMV sequence diagram. So we'll come up here, File, we will say Save the diagram as DMV sequence diagram. Next video, we'll add procedure calls and we'll finish up this DMV sequence diagram. Now we are going to begin to add procedure calls to our diagram. These are messages. Messages are procedure calls that are passed from one object to another. It is basically a command for the receiving object to perform a certain action. When adding any message, there are certain pieces of information that you are required to enter. Those are the name of the message, the type. A message can be one of 3 types: a procedure call, a flat flow of control, or an asynchronous stimulus. It occurs many times. If it does, it's a flag that indicates the message is sent over and over, and a guard condition, which is just a condition that must be met, must evaluate to true for the message to be sent. Okay, now I tell you a little quirk about Visible Analyst. You must have saved your sequence diagram as a sequence diagram before you can begin adding procedure calls. Otherwise, it won't let you name them. So make sure that you've said File and that you've saved it as a sequence diagram with the name that we stipulated, which was DMV sequence diagram. You can see that right up here. Okay, so you add procedure calls. We can do it through the taskbar up here by clicking on this first heavy black arrow. And then, like you do with other diagrams in Visible Analyst, you go over the activation bar from the object at which the message is being sent. So we're sending a message from the application entry window. Hold down the left mouse button, go over into the middle of the activation bar on the application class and let it up. And then it'll permit you to click on this new method. If you have not saved it as a sequence diagram, this will be grayed out and it'll frustrate you. Okay, so click on that. The name of this message is just going to be new and NEW. And we're going to say, okay. close, and then just OK again. You can change the type here for one of those three, but this is a procedure call, so we'll just leave it just like it is, and we say OK. And then if we click select, then you can see, notice it makes it look like an operation with the little parentheses. Okay, so that's that for the first one. Let's do some more, and we'll do them out of order. Let's add a procedure call with a condition. Okay, so again, we'll go into procedure call mode up here. And this will be from the application class all the way over to DMV database. And you got to be careful. You want to avoid the ends of these things, these activation bars. So we do that. Hold down the left mouse button while you're over the activation bar for application. Go straight across to DMV database, then let up, and we have to name it. So we will name this, and it's hard to see in the handout. On the PDF that I gave you, perhaps it's a bit clearer, but if you just printed the pages from the UML tutorial exe file, it's a little blurry. But I can tell you what it is. It is, and it says in there, it is update success. So let's type in the name, update success. Say OK. Leave all these things as they are. But you want to enter a guard condition. And the guard condition is passed. Okay, that means you passed your application. Okay, and so then we say OK again. And if we go over here into select mode so we can see this, right? So your application has been updated in the DMV database. You're sending a message from the application to the DMV database, and the condition is that you passed. Okay, so now the DMV database has you recorded as having passed the application. Let me show you one more, and then we'll do them all invisibly, as it were. Let's do one more, and this will be from application to drive test right here. And the reason I'm showing you this is because the name is very hard to see in the handout. Click new method, and it's kind of a nonsensical name. It is ISD RVOK. That's all it is. You say OK. We'll accept all of these, and we'll say OK. And again, if you can't see it, it's ISD RVOK. Okay, so now let's finish it off, and I'm going to do them all very fast, invisibly as it were, and then I'll show you what it should look like. So when you've added them all, it should look like this. Don't forget to save your diagram. File, save, as the same name, DMV sequence diagram. Note down here, these two are named the same thing, and I got this right out of the tutorial. I think the second one is redundant. There are some funny things in this tutorial that don't make sense, and I think this is one of them. I don't think you have to send the same update success from application to DMV database 2 times, but I'm just staying consistent with them. They are named the same thing, and they both have the guard condition pass. So this second one really doesn't make sense. This also, you need this, right? New, past. So now let's add a return. An object can send a message in response to a message sent to it earlier. So in our example, the application object returns the message sent to it by the application entry window object. This one, ISDRVOK, whatever that stands for. And so let's place the cursor on the activation bar under drive test. Just place it down here anywhere and click the left mouse button. But first you've got to go up here and get the dashed arrow. Don't forget to do that. This is the return arrow up here. So go into that mode. Go down here under the drive test anywhere and click on the left mouse, drag the cursor to the activation bar under application like this and release it. Okay, and you don't have to name this. Okay, but let's save it. You don't have to name that return message. Save it. Every time you change it, you ought to do something to it. You ought to save it. And now we're going to add text notes to the diagram. Let's go back into selection mode for a second. And this is the rightmost button. This is this one here, the T, add text. So let's click this and place we're going to add notes to this ISDRVOK, try to make some sense out of it. So we'll click on that and then put it right underneath that and click the left mouse and you get an add text window, and we're going to say past equals is driver okay, is DRV okay. So that's what is DRV okay means. Is the driver okay? And he is if he's, or she if he's passed. Then just say okay. Save the diagram, file, save, and we can make it look a little better. We can grab this and let's put it right up underneath this where it goes. And when you're done, it should look like this. This is the completed sequence diagram.